From Eyewitness News, this is Newsmakers.
Welcome to this special edition of Newsmakers, a Democratic primary debate among the candidates for Lieutenant Governor. Hello, I'm Tim White. Between 2000 and 2010, a Lieutenant Governor has been elevated to governor 22 times nationwide. The last time in Rhode Island was in 1950, but it's a position that can change in an instant. During this debate, we aim to show you the differences between the three Democratic candidates looking to become your next Lieutenant Governor. And they are, from left to right on your screen, Frank Ferri, Dan McKee, and Ralph Mollis. I'll be moderating this debate and asking questions along with WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi. We will begin with 1-minute opening statements from each of our candidates. The order was determined by a drawing. Up first is Ralph Mollis. After working in the private sector, Mr. Mollis was first elected to the North Providence City Council in 1986. He was then mayor of that city for 10 years. Mr. Mollis is in his second term as Rhode Island Secretary of State. He's a graduate of St. Anselm's College. Mr. Mollis, your opening remarks.
Thank you, Tim. Ted, I want to thank Channel 12 for this opportunity to debate. Also, I want to thank our viewers for tuning in to be informed voters on the September 9th primary. You know, this next hour, we're going to hear a lot of different things. We're going to hear the word statewide official as in a negative context. Yet all of us have been in elected office for anywhere from 7 to 18 years, and we're all running for statewide office. We're going to hear 38 studios, and rightfully so, yet each of my opponents are connected to 38 studios, with one opponent's campaign being heavily financed by the law firm at the center of it. The thing is, elections are about our future. Today, we should be talking about how we can help Rhode Island families fulfill their dream of having their children call Rhode Island home, how people can find jobs, how we can get a strong education system. I'm hoping that I can take my private sector experience, my public sector experience, my experience as an everyday Rhode Islander, and make a difference as Lieutenant Governor. And I look forward to this next hour talking about these issues, real issues that affect all of you, and how we want to be your next Lieutenant Governor, how we can make a difference in that office. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mollis. Now, Dan McKee. Mr. McKee has operated several small businesses, including McKee Oil and a health club. He was elected mayor of Cumberland in 2004. Prior to that, he served on the town council there for 6 years. Mr. McKee is a graduate of Assumption College and Harvard University. Mr. McKee, your opening remarks.
Well, first, thank you for the invite to be here, and I thank my opponents for being here as well and participating in this forum. One of the things that I want to say is that this is about issues. Like I bought a cranberry juice or a carrot juice from Ralph's son the other day, and certainly supported Rep. Ferri's issues on marriage equality. But this is about 4 in 5 people in the state of Rhode Island not believing that we're heading in the right direction. That's what this debate's about. It's about who has been involved in state leadership during that time that has brought us to the bottom in terms of business friendliness, and to the top in terms of being the very worst state in the country in terms of unemployment. So I think it's fair to compare our records, and I look forward to this debate to actually be talking about the things that Ralph just talked about, 38 studios, the unemployment issues, the bad economy that we're dealing with, and I'm looking forward to the debate tonight. So thank you very much for having me here.
Thank you, Mr. McKee. Now, Frank Ferri. Mr. Ferri is a small business owner operating Town Hall Lanes Bowling in Johnston for 25 years. He was elected state representative from Warwick in 2007 and still holds that seat. In that role, Mr. Ferri serves on the House Finance and Small Business Committees. He's a graduate of Bryant University. Mr. Ferri, your opening remarks.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Many of you don't know me yet, but I am a small business owner for 30 years. My first job was when I was 10 years old at my grandparents' ice cream parlor on Federal Hill, and I've been working ever since. A lot of politicians, they talk about small business. I run one every day. Fixing this economy means that we have to roll up our sleeves and work harder and smarter. People who know me know that I don't give up, not until I've won. Ask the people who stood by me day after day in the fight for marriage equality. If we're going to turn this state around, we must demand nothing less than the highest standings from our politicians. As Lieutenant Governor, I will be a watchdog, holding public officials accountable and making sure that Rhode Island is a place where people want to come to do business. I look forward to this debate, showing you who I am and what I believe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ferri. Now let's get to the topics at hand. Gentlemen, as you know, there's no strict format to this debate. We're looking for an open and honest discussion, and we will allow for some back and forth. And in fact, we encourage it as long as it's on the topic at hand. So let's begin. And there are many topics that you brought up in your opening statements, 38 Studios, so on and so forth, that we're going to talk about. But I want to take a look at the basic role of Lieutenant Governor. And Mr. McKee, we're going to begin with you on this first question. Many people in the state don't think the position of Lieutenant Governor should even exist. Almost 40% of Rhode Islanders voted for a candidate whose platform was to simply get rid of it, and that was in 2010. Tell us, if you could, how Rhode Islanders would be worse off if the position were eliminated.
Well, first, whether you believe that it should be there, or you have a strong belief like I do, or you don't, like Bob Healy did, that position is something that is very important. It could be the next governor of the state of Rhode Island, and that's really key. And the way that I've managed my town in terms of the finances and that type of thing is very appropriate in terms of the discussion that we need.
But the next governor of Rhode Island and other states that don't have a lieutenant governor is the Senate president, and they haven't turned into a hot mess, have they? So how would Rhode Islanders be worse off if the position didn't exist?
Well, I think first of all, it would be worse off if you didn't bring the skills to the table that can help change the direction of the state of Rhode Island. That office can be recreated. It can be very innovative on education issues, on job issues, on the economy issues. Those are all important things and contributions that could be made to that office.
Mr. Ferri, same question to you. How do you feel Rhode Islanders would be worse off if the position were in fact eliminated?
I never intended to get into politics, and when I did, it was because I was advocating for an issue that was dear to me. But when I ran and realized we have to participate in government. So I put myself into that position, and I worked as hard as I could. When somebody's going to take over for the governor, we're going to make sure that they're qualified. We want to make sure. I've been a business owner for 30 years. I have a business experience that I'm going to bring to that office. I bring it to my office now. We want somebody who's been elected by the state that's going to replace the governor, not a small contingency from a district of 75. You said it was the Senate president or the Speaker of the House, but if the Senate president, it's still a small contingent. I think that person should be qualified and elected by the state, not by a small contingency.
And I get that answer, as in maybe 3,000 to 4,000 people will be deciding who the Senate president was effectively. Beyond the delegation. But is that really the sole reason you think there should be a lieutenant governor here is succession? I mean, 2 out of 6 New England states don't have a lieutenant governor. Maine and New Hampshire, are they worse than Rhode Island?
Well, there are many that do have a lieutenant governor, and I just think that person needs to be prepared to step in when it arises. And when I'm in that position, I will, like I said, bring my experience. We need to work on the economy. We need to work issues of mine of healthcare. I want to see the thousands that have healthcare now because of the healthcare exchange, the businesses that have access to high quality, affordable healthcare. Those are issues that we need to concentrate on, we have to work on. And being the liaison with the General Assembly and the governor is extremely important. I believe that I could be that bridge.
Mr. Mollis, would Rhode Island slide into the ocean if the office of lieutenant governor were eliminated?
Probably not, but I'd much rather talk about why I think the office will be better off, but I'll definitely answer your question. First, I'll reiterate what both of my opponents have said here, and that if the governor does move on to other things, you do want a governor who has been elected by the entire electorate of the state, by a statewide, and not someone who's been elected by a district. But also, we talk about 1 or 2 or 3 or a handful of states that don't have a lieutenant governor. But 43 to 45, I forget the exact number, actually do have a lieutenant governor. That's why I've been promoting the governor and lieutenant governor running together, serving together. I think that when you have them from the same party, no matter what the party is, if they're working in unison, if they have similar ideas, although the lieutenant governor should have independent authority, if they have similar ideas and working in unison, I think the people are getting a consistent team working for the people. And should the governor move on, at least you know what you're getting with the lieutenant governor. So I think it's a viable position. I think it's a position that invites vision and leadership to tackle the issue of the day. We've seen that in the past. So there's a lot of reasons why we should have it, but there are a couple of reasons why we wouldn't be better off if we didn't have it.
Okay, Ted?
All three of you are Democrats, and this is a primary, but Rhode Island has actually had Republican governors for most of the last 30 years, and we've seen in just this current Lieutenant Governor Elizabeth Roberts case that often the effectiveness of a lieutenant governor depends on the governor. So I'm wondering, and I'll start with you, Mr. Ferri, how would you be effective if one of the Republicans, I know all of you say, well, we're going to elect a Democrat, but if that doesn't happen and a Republican becomes governor in November, how would you be effective working with that person come next January?
Well, I know working in government, you have to work with coalitions, you have to have stakeholders, all stakeholders at the table. So I will work with whoever is governor. And on the issue about lieutenant governor, that's why I think that's the value of the lieutenant governor's office right now. You can be independent. You can speak truth to power. You can call politicians out when you see something going wrong. So I will work with whoever is the governor. But I want to make sure that it's an independent voice in government. So
would you are known as a progressive, a staunch progressive. Would you actively oppose a Republican governor if you thought they were going down the wrong track?
I will oppose any policies that I think go against the better of Rhode Island. I mean, we want to move this economy forward. We want to move the state forward. If I don't agree with the policies, I'll speak out against them.
Mr. Mollis, same question to you. If a Republican is elected governor this fall and you're the lieutenant governor next year, how would you be effective with that person?
Be effective in a lot of different ways. First, you find some common ground. There has to be some common ground. Second, hopefully you can also influence that person with some of your beliefs. I mean, hopefully that person has the best interests of Rhode Island in mind and in heart. And so we can talk about similarities or maybe convince that person of some things that I believe in. I mean, an example is, not a direct example, but when I became mayor, I had a council that was 6 individuals who actually supported my opponent and 1 who supported me. And within 3 months, we had a budget passed, we had a deficit reduction plan passed, we were ready to move forward with new schools, a new senior center. You find common ground. And so there has to be a trust factor there. They'll know that I will fight for what I believe in, and I'll respect the fact that he or she will also fight for what they believe in. But you have to work together, because when the day is done, no matter what D or R or I follows us, we're all there to serve the people. And I have to think, for the most part, the candidates that are there have that in mind, and we can find some common ground.
Mr. McKee, same question. How would you be effective with a Republican governor?
Well, I've already been effective with Republican leadership executives in the state of Rhode Island, putting together a coalition of municipal leaders that reduced our health insurance cost in terms by 75%. So I've already done that, worked with Republicans that are in executive positions with Joe Almond, Mayor Fung, Mayor Evadijian. So what's in best interest for the state is not going to be an issue for me. I've already done it. I've already accomplished that. Reversing, creating a school, helping create a school funding formula, and I'll continue to advocate for that. So that's really not an issue for me. I want to work to make the state a place where people want to live in, not move away from. And I think that all of us do, but there's going to be need for new leadership and new ideas and a new direction to the state. And I would expect that with a new governor as well, that they would have the same thought that I would have in terms of changing the state.
Let me stick with you, Mr. McKee. Back in '07, Lieutenant Governor Roberts took a lot of criticism because during the December debacle snowstorm, Governor Carcieri was in Iraq and hadn't informed her, and she didn't know she was the senior figure in the state at that moment. I mean, do you think she did something wrong there, and would you do something differently?
In terms of whether she should have been
how should she have been doing more to be aware that Governor Carcieri was in Iraq or something and she was in charge? What do you think went wrong in that situation?
Well, I wasn't there, but I think there's a need for full communication between the offices, that we're all trying to do the same thing, create a state that people want to live in, and an economy that works for the people, and jobs and that type of thing. So yeah, I think that you would have strong interaction with the governor's office, as well as the other general offices, and including the General Assembly, which I've done as well.
Mr. Mollis, did you take any lessons away from the apparent miscommunication between Lieutenant Governor Roberts and Governor Carcieri during that snowstorm?
I'm not sure if we took any lessons, but I just think that speaks volumes to my argument that the governor and lieutenant governor should run together and serve together. I mean, we can sit here and blame either one. But with all due respect to Governor Carcieri, which I don't agree with that decision, but obviously there's a trust issue there, because you're from 2 different parties. Is this person going to run against me? Is this person going to go forward with my policies? The end result is that they need to run and serve together, and that's the only way it can be effective, I feel. I mean, I don't want to speak for Lieutenant Governor Roberts, who I have incredible admiration for, but I believe what I heard through the walls of the State House is that she never really saw the governor's office until Governor Chafee came in. And that says volumes about the trust factor in running together. So I will work along with whoever the governor is, and I guarantee we will have a productive relationship moving this state forward. but I still feel no matter what the party is, Rhode Island is best served with a governor and lieutenant governor working and running together.
And Mr. Ferri, did you take any lesson from that? Could you avoid a situation like that, do you think, if there was a Republican governor?
Well, just an aside, that was the day I was supposed to be sworn in for my special election. But I just think shame on Governor Carcieri for not putting the people of Rhode Island first and putting politics first. Not working with the lieutenant governor, not letting her know that he was going away. Shame on Governor Carcieri.
All right, Mr. McKee, you have been very critical of Secretary of State Mollis for launching an investigation into possible lobbying violations in the 38 Studios deal. But beyond the state police probe, which is still ongoing, he's the only state official that is moving forward with anything that could lead to action. With everyone in the state hungry for answers, why would you want to bring a halt to that process?
Because Ralph was aware of it 2 years earlier and did nothing. So how can he be in a position today to do something? Right now, there's an article right here. 2012, written by Ted, that said that asked him the very question. And he said that there wasn't a need to register a lobbyist. He said they didn't need one. Now he needs one.
I get the criticism of too late.
So too late, and it's been my point all along. Rep. Ferri voted for 38 Studios. Ralph Mollis turned a blind eye when he could have did something to help the state uncover the issue. It makes sense to me not to have elected officials that had any fingerprints on 38 Studios, to create an independent evaluation so the taxpayers and the residents of the state know what happened. So right now there's no one that's in elected office right now that could actually touch that. You need to remove it, get it second, third removed, create a situation where you can have an unbiased report that says what happened on the 38 Studios. And right now, the Secretary of State's office cannot do that.
Okay, Mayor, thank you. Mr. Mollis, he says your fingerprints are all over it.
Well, first, the most important thing to note here is that we began an investigation, and no one knows that better than right here, because we began it with you and the information you gave us. We began the investigation when we received new information. Never said at any time that I say someone didn't have to register as a lobbyist, because we wouldn't have known that. When we became aware that there were lobbying contracts involved, we immediately went forward, first of all. Second is, it's ironic that if I didn't go into an investigation, I'm not doing my job. If I do go into the investigation, it's political. And it's coming from someone, and with all due respect to Dan, it's coming from someone whose campaign is significantly financed by the very law firm that is at the center of the 38 Studios controversy, the law firm that advised EDC to go forward with this loan. The law firm was trying to make a settlement with the state for just over $4 million. So, it's difficult to get that criticism knowing that his campaign is financed by the individuals at the center of this controversy. But I will let this investigation speak for itself. We are moving forward. We have information. We are one of the only entities investigating, and I think the people of Rhode Island, when the day is done, will realize that it was an investigation well done by someone who is the only individual who has experience doing this, and we will let the results speak for themselves.
And Mr. Ferri, I'll give you a moment in a second. Let's hear from you.
Yeah, I got to respond on this.
Yes.
First of all, what I'm calling for is an arm's length investigation so all the issues could be put on the table, including anybody who has their fingerprints on it, including the General Assembly who voted for that, and Secretary of State's office. He can say he wasn't aware of it, but he was aware of it. 2012, he was aware of it. So you can't walk away from that.
Do you want to respond to the comment he made about the law firm?
Absolutely, I just did. Have an independent study, and where the chips fall, they fall. I'm not looking to cover up anything with anybody that I'm working with, and yet Ralph the question to Ralph is, why wouldn't he have a third party investigate this thing so that we could see what the Secretary of State did in this situation? We can see what the law firm did in this situation. We can see what the General Assembly did in this situation.
Mr. Mollis?
It's my job to investigate. It's not my job to pass that responsibility on. And we're running for office here. We have to realize that when you're elected by the people and the law gives you statutory obligations to go forward, you just don't pass them on because it may not be politically expedient. We have a job to do. We're doing it. We hired a third-party hearing officer, the only person who has any experience in this in the last 20 years. We've had one hearing in the last 20-plus years. So I'm not going to pass this on because it may be politically expedient or to get this off the table for debate. I have a job to do. The people will see those results, and that's what they'll get as lieutenant governor also, someone who will do the job that I'm elected to do.
All right, Mr. Ferri, I want to get you to respond to two things now in those comments. First and foremost, you've remained silent on all of this so far between Mr. McKee and Mr. Mollis. I'm wondering if you think the 38 Studios lobbying hearing should continue.
I want to see sunshine brought to this whole matter. Nobody's happy with this. It's just been a disaster, and it's a bad situation. And we just want to make, I want to make sure that everything's brought out on the table and everything's cleared up. I guess I have to respond that, you know, we voted, I want to see us move this economy. When we hit this recession, we had the highest unemployment. We're so deep into this recession, we're still not coming out of it, we're the last to come out of it. There was a job creation program that was presented to us, and we voted on that. Now, if somebody knew that $75 million was going to go to one company, then shame on them. We need to know that. We need to know what the truth is about this, and we need to make sure that we bring this to light. I want to be strong in ethics. We need to restore the Ethics Commission with their full authority that they had before. That's the type of thing we need to do. This thing wasn't vetted. It was a quick fix. It was voted on by EDC. Governor Kachery was at the head of that table when they voted on 38 Studios, not Representative Ferri.
Okay, you answered my second question, which was voting on the loan guarantee program that ultimately funded 38 Studios, but I don't feel like you answered my first question, which is, should Mr. Mollis continue with the lobbying investigation, or should we do as Mr. McKee says and take it out of his hands?
I don't think, as an elected official in that position or any other elected position right now, we should be overseeing ourselves. And that's just about what it is, the state overseeing itself that way. I think we should have somebody like the Ethics Commission.
Okay, we are. I'll give 30 seconds to wrap this conversation up, and we'll start with you, Mr.
Sure. And again, you know, with all due respect to Representative Ferri, I just want to clarify something. I would agree that you should never oversee yourself. I didn't vote for 38 Studios. I wasn't involved in 38 Studios. The Secretary of State has nothing to do with 38 Studios. So I'm not overseeing myself. I'm overseeing something that took place in the state of Rhode Island that someone failed to lobby potentially, and that's my job.
Mr. McKee, 30 seconds.
Yeah, the Secretary of State was aware of this in 2012. That's when he should have acted. That's how he gets connected into 38 Studios. He should have reacted at that time, maybe earlier. I'm the only one that's offering an option to create a third-party resolution to this thing, and it's the right thing to do to get to the bottom of this for taxpayers in the state of Rhode Island.
Mr. Ferri, final word.
We need strong oversight, and we haven't had it.
Mr. Ferri, we'll stick with you actually on a different topic. You introduced legislation this year to create a new Rhode Island Health Care Authority. In 2016, that would require all state residents to purchase their insurance through HealthSource RI, the state's Affordable Care Act marketplace, including Medicare recipients. Why do you think all Rhode Islanders should have to go through HealthSource RI?
There was an article in today's paper. Dr. Hittner has announced about the increases in premiums that Blue Cross are requesting and the other insurance companies are. And she just said today, through the healthcare exchange, we are actually lowering our premiums. We're lowering rates. We're actually taking control of our healthcare in Rhode Island through this healthcare exchange. So we need to have a comprehensive plan in Rhode Island for healthcare. There's $9 billion in the healthcare system in Rhode Island. And right now we have a handle on. It's a start. We're not finished. We're not nearly finished. But Neighborhood Health Plan has reported that they have a product coming out next year that's going to be lower than their lowest price product this year. So the healthcare exchange is actually working. I want to keep it on track, and I want to make sure that we bring down costs. We make healthcare delivery cost more efficient in the state.
You know, though, many people in this state and other states have concerns about the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, and people might not take kindly the idea that they'll have no choice in Rhode Island but to buy their insurance through HealthSource RI.
There's many choices. Right now we're going to have 3 carriers, and they have many products. So there's going to be a lot of choice in this system.
All right, Mr. McKee, not the same question, but what do you think of that idea of having all health insurance purchased through HealthSource RI? Could you support that?
If it lowered cost, I could. And I think you would have to see that. I mean, that's one of the things I do bring to the Lieutenant Governor's office is that I've helped municipalities throughout the state of Rhode Island lower that cost by millions and millions of dollars. through collaborating and bringing mayors and municipal leaders together, so that we did group buy into Blue Cross and reduced our cost for taxpayers by millions of dollars. So the concept sounds good, but it's got to be affordable, right? You've got to make sure that you know that it's affordable. And if it is, then you should. Lowering health care costs, I've done that just recently in our police pension issue and a police contract, have lowered with high deductible plans. There's a number of creative ways that you can lower health insurance costs. I think that Lieutenant Roberts has made the health care issue a niche in that office. I would staff that up to do the research that is needed to be able to say that in fact it does lower cost, and if it does lower cost, I would support that.
Mr. Mollis, do you think you could support having everyone go through Health Source RI to buy insurance?
First, very quickly, I am convinced health care and the cost will be the most important factor over these next 10 to 15 years. It is out of control. The mere fact that I also, as mayor, was able to do what we could do to reduce our health care costs is the reason why we shouldn't require Rhode Islanders to go to Health Source Rhode Island. What I mean by that is that Health Source Rhode Island should be an option. There's no question. But it should be one of the options, because there may be someone, or maybe someone out there that has some ideas to lower the cost. This is not a one-size-fits-all. And so while there are options on the Health Source Rhode Island, and that should be open to all Rhode Islanders because it is a very good program, we shouldn't require Rhode Islanders to have to go through that program to get the health care.
Mr. Ferri, do you have a response to that, not making that the sole source of buying insurance?
Right now we have thousands of Rhode Islanders who have health care. We have access for hundreds of small businesses that have joined the healthcare system, the exchange. I'm putting my business into the exchange on August 1st. I believe that it is a path to lowering costs, making it more efficient. Healthcare is something that I really want to pursue, because as a small business person, I know the increases in premiums. As a matter of fact, in 2005, when I had my premium letter from Blue Cross, it was 38%, so I knew we had a crisis in healthcare. I see us addressing these healthcare costs and efficiencies through this exchange. I think it's a great way to go.
Okay, gentlemen, the single most important role of Lieutenant Governor is to take over as governor if need be. We want to get where you stand on the issues if you were governor, issues that you would face in that role. So let's do a rapid fire section here, and I'm looking for essentially one-word answers. And we're going to start left to right here. Mr. Ferri, are you pro-choice or pro-life?
Pro-choice.
Mr. McKee?
Pro-choice.
And Mr. Mollis?
Abortion should be safe and rare.
Yes or no, and I know you sort of answered this, but on the record here, will you vote for the combined ticket for governor and lieutenant governor on the ballot this November, yes or no?
I know you're asking for a single answer, I apologize, but the way this is written, no, but I am in favor of it. This is an appointment, it's not an elected, so I have some concerns.
Okay. Mr. McKee?
Question is,
Would you support a combined
Yes.
ticket? Let's ask it that way, you would.
Yes.
And Mr. Ferri?
A combined if the offices stay independent.
And how would the offices stay independent if they're
Well,
combined?
I'm just concerned, I want to make sure that the Lieutenant Governor can speak truth to power, and I think the strength in that is the independence in that office.
Okay, well, the majority of you here pick a combined ticket, so I'm curious who you would like to see as your running mate this year. Who do you support for governor this year, Mr. Mollis?
Well, I will support the individual who wins the primary. I mean,
But you'd have to run on a combined ticket at this
Well,
point.
that's a great point. That's why I said I'm for a combined ticket, but I have a problem with this question, because this question has a combined ticket immediately. What a lot of states are doing that I'm in favor of is you have a Democratic primary for governor and lieutenant governor, and your Republican primary, et cetera. And then the winners of those primaries are then coupled together, and then they run in November.
Mr. McKee, who do you like for governor?
I've met with all three. I can work with anyone.
And Mr. Ferri?
I will work whoever the nominee is.
All right, Mr. McKee here, if you become governor, would you sign a bill that would establish a legal market for licensed businesses to sell marijuana to adults 21 years of age or older?
No.
And Mr. Ferri?
You know, prohibition didn't work in the 20s with alcohol. It's not going to work with marijuana. Yes, I would.
Okay, and Mr. Mollis?
No.
Mr. Ferri, do you support a high-stakes test as a graduation requirement?
No.
Mr. Mollis?
Absolutely not.
Mr. McKee?
I think you should measure and that it's important that we do that it's fair to the students and fair to the families.
So that's a yes.
Yes, I'm not sure exactly the way they've done it at the moment, but I think that they can come up with certainly a standard as Massachusetts has in Massachusetts, the #1 public school system in the country. So I think we could learn something from our neighbor.
Mr. Mollis, letter grade for Lieutenant Governor Elizabeth Roberts.
I don't give letter grades. I mean, she's done a lot of good. I know you want one word, but I don't give letter grades for any candidates. I wouldn't do that.
Are you going to answer the question, Mr. Ferri? Letter grade for
Well,
Elizabeth
I would
Roberts?
give her an A because her leadership on this health care issue has just been exceptional.
And Mr. McKee?
Yeah, I'd give it an A.
All right. Pay the 38 Studios bond back. How do you feel about that, Mr. McKee? Yes or no?
Well, I think you need to go to the insurances that are available to you, and we should be pursuing that.
So do not pay the bond back, is what you're saying.
I think that's part of the strategy in that case, but I think it's a multiple strategy in terms of where the resources come from. But we should be going after the $651,000 insurance policy that we bought to protect the taxpayers.
Okay, Mr. Mollis
The best interest of the state must come first, so regretfully, yes.
and Mr. Ferri.
We have a lawsuit that's going forward. I want to see that going forward. I don't want to make a bad
That
situation.
lawsuit could take quite some time.
I don't want to see a bad situation made worse. Yes, we pay the. Pay.
Okay. Do you support raising the minimum wage to $10.10 an hour, Mr. Ferri?
I'd like to see a path to that. Yes.
Yeah, and Mr. McKee?
Yes, over time, and I would also put some sort of a CPI strategy into the base that you agree to, so that we don't have to go through this all the time. We can actually maintain ourselves in terms of the cost of living.
That's a yes, Mr.
And I also think
Mollis?
it's a bigger picture that we can fix, but the short answer is yes.
And final rapid fire question before we get to Ted. Mr. Mollis, do you support or oppose binding arbitration for teachers?
Do I support or oppose binding arbitration? I oppose.
And Mr. McKee?
Absolutely opposed.
And Mr. Ferri?
I would support it.
Okay, thank you. Ted?
Mr. McKee, we'll start with you on this one. You mentioned earlier Cumberland's financial health, and looking through the audits for the town, since you returned to the mayor's office in 2007, the pension plan, the locally run pension plan, has declined significantly. The plan has gone from 50% funded in 2007 to 32% funded in 2012. In 2010, Cumberland's actuaries said you need to put $1.3 million into the plan, and you only put about $200,000. How do you defend underfunding the pension plan and let it getting into poorer and poorer financial shape?
Well, first, I was elected as mayor in 2000. I began in 2000, served from 2000 to 2004. And there was no actuaries done during the 5 years prior to me being in office. I was legally bound to have it once every 2 years. We did it every year going forward. We funded over 93% of the ARC during that time frame. When I came back in 2007, we continued to do that. But the good news here is that I've worked 3 years to solve that problem. We have solved that problem. Unlike my opponent who left high deficits when he left office, I'll leave with surpluses and a fix both to the health insurance issue because of a contract we just negotiated, and the pension issue.
But the actuary said you needed to put in $1.3 million to fund your pension plan in 2010, and you only put in about $200,000.
Let's talk about the impact that budgets that Rep. Ferri voted for and Secretary Mollis was silent on, that removed millions of dollars from cities and towns during that time frame. We were swimming for our lives, keeping our heads above water because of the actions that came out of the General Assembly. Alone, Warwick lost $17 million during that time frame. Alone, the town of North Providence lost $8 million in state funding during the time. Yeah, you're right. We managed our way through. But the good news is I've worked for the last 3 years to solve that problem. That problem is solved. We'd be the first ones.
So you say the pension problem is solved in Cumberland?
We'll be the first ones in the state of Rhode Island to both solve the OPEB issue and the pension issue for local pensions.
OPEB, retiree health for the people.
Retirement health. We will have a fully funded ARC for the retirement health, reducing the potential damage to the town of Cumberland by $200 million over the next 40 years. And the pension with what we did in terms of the contract, which is a unique contract, that we're the first ones in the state of Rhode Island to go to a career average for new staff members that are hired in. We have solved the problem. I came in the community with a deficit. I'm leaving with surpluses. We have managed the town extremely well, and I've done nothing better than the negotiation on this contract. And when it comes out, you'll see that it's all done. And
all right, Mr. Mollis, Mr. McKee says he solved their pension problem, but you left a mess back in North Providence. What do you say?
I have a couple of forms here that show. First, When the mayor became mayor, his pension fund was about 57%. It was considered critically underfunded. Over his tenure, he's brought it down to 31.9%. I'm not even sure what category to put that in. So he balanced the budget on the backs of the taxpayer and on the backs of the pensioners by not making the required contributions to this pension plan. As far as North Providence is concerned, before I became mayor, that is what I did in the private sector. I was vice president of a company that managed pension plans. When I came in, we did have a funding problem. When I left, we were 92% funded, according to the actuary, one of the highest funding in Rhode Island. As far as the budget itself, we had 9 out of 10 balanced budgets. We erased our deficit. We left behind a town better than the one we found. So if we want to talk about budgets, we have a great track record as mayor, even though that was 8 years ago. And when it comes to pensions, I mean, 92% versus 31.9%. I mean, someone wasn't paying the bill in Cumberland when it came to the Cumberland pension plan, and that is just passing it on to the next generation.
Mr. Ferri, I want to ask you about some of your supporters coming from the more liberal public sector unions in the state who are opposed to the pension law, though I know you voted for that in 2011. Do you still support the pension law that you voted for then?
When we were presented with a pension reform, that we thought we had the best offer on the table. We thought that was the best that we could get. I know I worked hard on trying to lower the age and a little more consideration to COLAs and that. But now we learn that there was another, after the court ordered that they go back into negotiations, there was a better deal. So knowing that there was a better deal, knowing now that not everybody that should have been at the table is at the table, I'm not sure how I would have voted back then, because now that I know there was a better deal for the workers, I probably would have not voted for it back then, but I want to make sure that everybody's around that table, and that's what I'm going to do with the Lieutenant Governor's office. What we failed to do in this state is long-term planning. We just go for quick fixes, like something like 38 studios, whatever. That's what I've experienced my 7 years at the State House now. I want to be able to sit with the right contingency, the right stakeholders around the table, and actually plan out our policies so we don't run into this mess again.
You know, Mr. Ferri, I want to give you 30 seconds on Ted's question here, just to follow up to a comment Mr. McKee made, which is you gave both your town, his town, and North Providence a raw deal with the budget by underfunding state aid to local cities and towns. How do you respond to that? 30 seconds, please.
Well, a lot of that, I believe, has to do with the way we do our budgeting and the way we do our planning, because we don't plan for the future. I guess we're planning for year to year to year, and it's the way we approach that. No budget that cuts any social services or cuts to municipalities is a good budget.
All right, Mr. Mollis, we're going to go to you on this, and we're going to talk about education now. I want you to do a little diagnosis on Rhode Island. Same region. Same population demographics, active teachers unions, but Massachusetts has a world-class education system, and Rhode Island consistently performs near the bottom. Why?
There's a number of reasons. First, inadequate funding. Right now in Rhode Island, cities and towns handle the brunt of funding education. Number two, and we've talked about this a lot, the increase of charter schools, and that's not the reason for our low performing, believe me, but that is a concern that I have, that it's siphoning money from our public education system. For a school system, a whole nother region, a whole nother administration that chooses students by lottery. They're teaching kids at 12, a ratio of 12 per teacher, where public schools are 27, 28. I mean, we need to take some of the funds that we're taking out of public schools, get it back into public schools, give our teachers the tools and the...
There are plenty of charter schools up in Massachusetts. Is that your diagnosis for our problems?
No, and I was clear that I said that wouldn't be the reason. That is increasing the region. That is increasing the reason. I'm convinced of that we are taking money out of public schools. The end result is that our education system is financed on a local level. As mayor, my budget was 60-40, 60% education. I'm sure Mayor McKee is somewhat the same, and most cities and towns are. We need to change the way we fund education. We need to make sure that public money is going into public schools, and we need to give teachers the tools and the support they need to teach our students literacy skills, life skills, and not force them to teach the test. And that's going to be part of my platform as Lieutenant Governor, a strong voice for public education.
Mr. Ferri, you've had a front row seat at the General Assembly for education policy issues. Why does Rhode Island consistently underperform Massachusetts?
Because I believe that we're not giving our schools all the resources they need We're not addressing some of the real problems in our urban cities. We need, and I'm a product of public school. I went to public school. I grew up in a 3-decker in West Elmwood. And I believe that we have to give them the resources that they need. Private schools are great, maybe Mayoral Academy may be great, but we can't shift those resources from the public schools. We need to make sure that we keep our eye on the public schools and give them the resources they need.
Mr. McKee, I feel like I need you to answer the question regarding the Mayoral Academy, as both candidates.
Well, I want to answer the issue of education, but first I got to go back to what Mayor Mollis said, that he left the city in better shape than he found it. Here's his bond rating.
Briefly, please.
Briefly. He began with a B, ended with a B. I started with a B and ended with an A. Here's the headline right here: North Province in a fiscal crisis. Their own auditor said that they were insolvent, on insolvency in 2004. On the education issue, all right, this is a very important issue. I am for great public schools. What you just heard you heard no ideas from my opponents relative to how to improve public education. Secretary Mollis had talked about a school funding formula when he was mayor. I did something about it. I commissioned a report that was signed on by 70% of the municipal leaders in the state of Rhode Island that became the roadmap for a school funding formula that brought in millions of dollars to communities that were not receiving it. So in terms of the funding, yes, one of the goals that we should have is to get to at least national average in terms of education funding, which is 47%, and we hover around the mid-30s. Both my opponents have been in state government for 8 years. And we're going to start talking about that now. We need to reverse and bring new ideas to the state of Rhode Island. New leadership will bring new ideas, and you need ideas, and education is going to improve that. On the Mayoral Academy, it is a public school. It is a high-performing public school that's driving changes into our district schools. Full-day kindergarten in Lincoln and Cumberland as a result of the Mayoral Academy. Higher performance in our district schools.
Mr. Mollis, let's have you weigh in. He says it's a higher performance there. Why isn't it working?
Well, first, it is not a public school. As far as I'm concerned, a public school is not a school that chooses its students via lottery, that does not have an elected body to answer to. It is not a public school. And as far as the performance, I would also disagree. I know that if you take out the special ed component of the Cumberland High School, that the Cumberland High School and the Mayoral Academy have somewhat equal grades. And so it is not a higher performing school. And when we talk about funding, I mean, that is something I did as mayor. I was president of the Rhode Island League of Cities and Towns. We had a very aggressive attack on trying to get a sustainable funding formula. With all due respect to Mayor McKee, and I know we have this report that we're showing around, but if you do some research over these last 12 to 24 months, and you'll see that the superintendent is in the local newspaper in Cumberland saying that this mayor isn't giving them enough funding. So you can flash around a wonderful funding formula, but his own community is saying you're not giving us enough money. Too much money is going to Mayoral Academies.
And we're running short on time in this debate. I want to give Mr. Ferri final word. You're a little short on time, Mr. Ferri. Would you like final word in this segment? He's saying that you haven't provided any specifics.
A great education should not depend on a lottery. I'm sorry. So these are like private schools, and I just want to make sure that we give the resources to the public schools that we need and address the real issues like socio-economic issues that we have.
Okay, Ted.
Mr. Mollis, Secretary of State, you've been closely associated with the push for a voter ID law in Rhode Island. You've discussed it many times. As you know, that's not usually a popular position for a Democrat to take in many other states. Why did you support voter ID in Rhode Island when so many other Democrats say it's disenfranchising?
Well, first, and I agree with that statement as far as, the political expedient thing to do would have been to be against voter ID. It would have been popular in the primary, but it wouldn't have been right. And national voter ID, I am against. There are states around this country that are implementing voter ID strictly to disenfranchise minority voters. Rhode Island has become a national model. We have a voter ID law that does not disenfranchise anyone, that we accept an array of IDs, that we give free IDs to people, that has been looked at as a model for our country. 2012, we had over 550,000 ballots cast. And you'll talk to 25 town clerks and city clerks who testified before House Oversight. They said it helped the lines, and not one person was turned away for lack of an ID. No one lost their vote because they didn't have an ID because of our innovative law that allows provisional balloting. So am I against national voter ID laws that are happening across this country? Absolutely. But Rhode Island has taken this example, this problem, and has made it one that we can do it without disenfranchising people, but protecting the integrity of the election. It's something I stand by.
Do you think Rhode Island had a problem with voter fraud at the polls, a regular problem with that prior to this law?
There wasn't. There were a handful of issues that were brought to people's attention. They were all public issues that we heard about. It wasn't a case, and so I did not introduce this voter ID law as a reaction to voter fraud. I introduced it to be proactive. And sometimes the best laws are the ones that are written that prevent things from happening, not the laws that are written after something happened.
Mr. Ferri, I want you to weigh in on the voter ID law. It obviously came out at the General Assembly, and Mr. Mollis says it's a different model for Rhode Island. What do you think of the voter ID law?
Well, I didn't vote for the voter ID law. You know, in this country, one of the greatest thing about this country is our ability to vote. And I don't think we should be putting barriers in front of people. This was a solution looking for a problem. There really wasn't any problem in Rhode Island that we know of. I want to expand voting. We should have same-day registration. We should have early voting. We should have weekend voting. I want us to see all we can do to make sure that everybody gets a chance to vote and that we don't put any barriers in front of anybody.
And of course, people who will be listening who will probably think to themselves, well, the vote is so important, an election is so important. Why should we should do everything possible to make sure everyone is voting correctly. Why not check an ID? Everyone has an ID. What would you say to that voter?
Because there are barriers that are put up with that. There are problems. There are seniors. There are problems to voting, and it does apparently prevent some people from voting. So I just don't think there's a problem.
Mr. McKee, I just want you to weigh in briefly. Where do you stand on the voter ID law?
I certainly want to weigh in on this. The issue is that there's ways that you can protect your vote, Ted, without disenfranchising another vote. And we know, if you listen to constituents out in our state, there are people who feel as though they've been targeted on that. Nationally, on the national average, about 40 out of 197 million reports nationally. That's a 0.00000013% possibility. I would have been spending my time, instead of doing that, on the 10% of the people who did not have a job in the state of Rhode Island, on the 30% of the trades that didn't have a job in the state of Rhode Island, on the 80% of the students that graduated from North Providence High School when Ralph was mayor that weren't proficient in math, and I would have done it on the 100% of the small businesses and the businesses in this state who happen to be in the most unfriendly business state.
We're off of voter ID. Just to give you 30 seconds to respond.
And if I can, and I will, I'll stick with voter ID, but I will say that we have implemented programs that have been nationally acclaimed to help small business. North Providence High School was a nationally accredited and a national model. And I did voter ID. I can multitask. I can do more than one thing. And so, yes, we have done a lot as Secretary of State, more than anyone can imagine. And we did leave behind a town better than we found in North Providence. And I did introduce voter ID. I mean, I can do more than one thing at a time.
Okay, we're going to talk about something that is in the news right now. Mr. Ferri, we'll begin with you on this question. The Obama administration has asked some states to shelter unaccompanied children who have crossed the border while their status is worked out legally. If asked, should Rhode Island provide shelter?
These children are actually refugees. Let's call them what they are. They're refugees right now, and there's a process in this country with refugees. I just think we need to use that process, get the resources we need to be able to treat these refugees the way they should be. Okay,
so you would be open to allowing refugees to come into the state of Rhode Island at this point, if you were governor?
Right, as refugees.
I just want to stick with you here on the immigration question, just a couple of litmus tests, if you will. Should we give driver's licenses to undocumented immigrants, Mr. Ferri?
I think that's the right thing to do. It's a safe thing for us to do.
And the Rhode Island Department of Education has authorized in-state tuition for undocumented immigrants living here. Are you okay with that?
Yes, I think everybody deserves an education, and education is just so pricey right now. We should make it affordable for anybody who's in this country.
And if the General Assembly or RI decided to overturn it, if there was a change on the board there, as Lieutenant Governor, would you push hard to champion it to make sure it remains in place?
I would support it, yes.
Okay. Mr. Mollis, let's go to you with the original question about the Obama administration requesting states take in some of these kids for shelter. Would you approve that if you were governor?
Of all the questions, that's the most difficult. And I say that because as governor, I would be in touch with the president and letting them know that we need to reform the way we have our path to immigration. And it's a tough question, I will answer it, but I'm the grandson of grandparents who came here from another country and came here for something better. And so that's something to be said about this country when people are coming here. But we need to do it right. We need for the president to call and say that we're just sending individuals, refugees to your state, when we need a plan to address this, a national plan. So my initial reaction I'd have reservations. I would lean towards no.
You would say no?
I would lean towards no.
Okay.
I don't want to close the door on it, Tim.
Mr. McKee?
Well, I think that we're a generous state, but we have to take care of the issues that are at hand, and we've got all that we can handle based on the track record we've had over the last few years. But I think you would go out and do similar to what we did on 9/11. We raised a lot of money in this state, and we sent it to those people who were impacted. I think there's ways that you can help that situation without negatively impacting and putting an overburden on the state right now in our infrastructure. And we are up to our neck right now in trying to deal with what we're dealing with.
Ted?
Mr. Ferri, I'll start with you on this one. Everyone in the state, you were in the General Assembly, knows about Gordon Fox's fall from grace a few months ago. We also now have Buddy Cianci running for mayor again, and he very well might win. I'm just wondering, as someone involved in Rhode Island politics, do you think there is a corruption problem in Rhode Island politics?
That's why I think we need to strengthen the Ethics Commission and give them back their authority that they have. Anybody who takes advantage of a political office or takes advantage of the electorate, there must be consequences for that. We need to improve our image in Rhode Island, and we're not going to improve our image if we're going to keep electing people who don't give us the what we deserve as far as honesty and good government.
Gordon Fox was an ally of yours, of course, especially in the marriage equality push on that. What was your reaction when you saw, agents going into his office and home and then his quick resignation?
Well, I was surprised and shocked, like a lot of others in the State House. So I think it's unfortunate, and I think we have to move on, and we have to make sure that we restore trust in government, and that's what I would want to do as the Lieutenant Governor. I want to be able to address that and call and speak truth to power.
Mr. Mollis, North Province hasn't always been synonymous with ethical government in recent years. Do you think there's a problem with corruption in Rhode Island politics?
Yes, and I'm not saying it's any different than other states. It may be worse than some, hopefully better than others, but yes, I mean, this is a profession that you have to be held to the highest of standards. People are putting trust in you. So if there's one individual that's a corruption problem, we've had more than one. We've had a series of this happening. So yes, I think and again, it could be happening in other states also, but we need to worry about Rhode Island. And so, we have a corruption problem, for lack of a better definition, that we need to address, because Rhode Island's image needs to be reinforced because it is a great state.
Mr.
And we do
McKee?
a lot of good people here.
Yeah, and there's certainly examples of the corruption and, coming full circle. That's why I'm calling for an independent study on the 38 studios, because there is a perception that surrounds that entire matter, as you say, there's in that issue. So I think that's the reason that you need new leaders. Let's not elect the same people that have brought us to this spot that have already been conducting their affairs on the state level. Let's bring new leadership in and create new direction. And I think that one of the issues that needs to be brought, most of the people out there in government are not corrupt, but yet the perception is that we are, and that's why you need new leadership, create new direction for the state of Rhode Island, and bring somebody who's had the experience in terms of government that actually brings a clean slate to that office and doesn't have any baggage related to any level of corruption.
We have about 1 minute before we're going to go to our closing remarks, so I just want to hit up a couple of questions very, very briefly. Mr. McKee, if either of your opponents win, we'll remind everyone the Democrats are sitting at the table here, will you endorse either of them for general election?
Yeah, I support the Democrats in the state of Rhode Island.
And Mr. Mollis?
Absolutely.
And Mr. Ferri?
Yes, I'm a Democrat.
Which person do you most admire who held public office in Rhode Island? Who do you admire most?
Who holds public?
It could be hold or had held.
Sheldon Whitehouse right now is somebody that I admire for his ideals and for his hard work.
Okay, briefly, Mr. McKee, we have about 10 seconds.
Someone that I would, there's a number, but I think that Jack Reed is a good example of somebody who is conducting himself very well. and along with Patrick Kennedy. I did admire his hard work ethic.
Mr. Mollis.
There's so many, but because you said held office, I'll say Governor Gary.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Now each of the candidates will have a chance to give their closing remarks. Again, the order for this was determined by a drawing, and we're going to begin with Mr. Ferri. Mr. Ferri, your 60-second closing remarks.
Thank you. I hope you've come away with a better understanding of who I am, what I believe, and why I want to be Lieutenant Governor. I am a successful small business person for 30 years, and I have a record of fighting hard for my constituents. When I'm Lieutenant Governor, I will fight for the thousands who own and work in small business. I will be a champion for those who want to start a business, and I will make sure that we keep the best and brightest in Rhode Island, connecting colleges and universities with the entrepreneurs of tomorrow. As Lieutenant Governor, I will make sure the government knows what you need, and I will make sure I give you the help that you deserve to make your dreams come true. I am running for Lieutenant Governor because I am confident in the future of Rhode Island. I believe that we can be better. I mean, I know we can be better. So on December 9th, if you'll support me in the Democratic primary, I know that together we can build a stronger Rhode Island.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ferri. Mr. Mollis, your 60-second closing remarks.
I want to thank, again, Channel 12 and both Tim and Ted for the opportunity to have this debate and talk about real issues. And I want to thank you, the viewers, most importantly, for taking the time to be informed on the candidates as the September 9th primary approaches. You know, 8 years ago, I ran for Secretary of State with a promise to reform the way that office serves the public. And we've done that, from business services to voter registration to so much more. We've taken that office to a whole nother level. I would love to do the same thing as Lieutenant Governor. I want to allow families who have dreams that their children can find jobs here and call Rhode Island home. Let those dreams come to fruition. For people who want to open up business, for people who want to find jobs and make ends meet. This is a wonderful state. And I know that I can take that experience both in the private sector, public sector, but also my experience as an everyday Rhode Islander and make a difference for you. So if you believe in that vision, if you believe in what I have to say, if you believe in my experience, my desire to serve, then I humbly ask you for your support on September 9th to be your next Lieutenant Governor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mollis. Now, Mr. McKee, your 60-second closing
Thank you
remarks.
so much, and I do ask the same for support in the September 9th primary. But let's spend a couple of seconds on the jobs and the economy, which we didn't spend a lot of time on. We're the worst business-friendly state in the country. We need to change that. As Lieutenant Governor, I will. 90 days, first 90 days, I'll put a plan in that shows a tax-friendly and be competitive with the rest of our neighboring states. And finally, we need to save our human resources, human capital leaving this state of Rhode Island, which is our young people. Our young people are leaving. The entrepreneurs are leaving. We need to do everything we possibly can to keep those entrepreneurs in the state of Rhode Island. I stand with the 4 and 5 people that feel as though this state is going in the wrong direction. If you believe that to be true, then I ask you for your support on September 9th. I will do everything I can, as I did in the town of Cumberland as mayor, to make my community a place where people want to live, not move away from. And as Lieutenant Governor, I will do everything in my power to help Rhode Island become a state that people want to live and not move away from. Thank you.
Mr. McKee, and my thanks to all 3 candidates for taking part in this debate. And we have much more to come. Next week in this studio, another Democratic primary debate with the candidates for the office of Secretary of State. Guillaume de Ramel and Nellie Gorbea go head-to-head. You can watch it on our regular times on Newsmakers, Sunday 5:30 a.m. on WPRI 12 and 10 a.m. on our sister station, Fox Providence. Of course, you can watch all of our debates and catch up on each race in campaign 2014 on our website, WPRI.com. Then starting next month, we are once again bringing you more live gubernatorial debates. Democrats Clay Pell, Angel Taveras, and Gina Raimondo on the issues, live 7 p.m. on August 29th. Then Republicans Alan Fung and Ken Block on September 2nd. Both debates are a full hour, commercial-free, and both those races are heating up. Of course, you can watch all of our debates and catch up on each race in campaign 2014 on our website, WPRI.com. Be sure to read Nesi's notes. We thank you for watching this special edition of Newsmakers, a debate with the candidates for Lieutenant Governor. Stick with Eyewitness News, your source for campaign 2014 coverage. For Ted Nesi, I'm Tim White, and we'll see you next week on Newsmakers.